and welcome to another Mark Bishop show. Well, I had my first trip to the island of America over the last few weeks, called Colorado. Well, you may laugh, but the character I was fortunate enough to meet and have a lot of fun with while I was there, he says the same thing, and that's where I got it from. So Joe Ditler is now a writer, storyteller, and sometime publicist who is truly a native of that formerly quaint place that is now, of course, one of the most popular holiday spots for Arizonans and many others across America, and for that matter, internationally. So for the reading corner on this particular episode, another new book, and folks, it's from this obscure little Muscoy in Southern California, Inland's Empire, to the seemingly sleepy island of Coronado, an unlikely milieu of retired admirals and aging hippies, fringed with palm trees, angled and shaped by the wind. That Joe Ditler stirs the cobwebs of those who shared his fondness and folly for the highs and lows of the 60s, in his fabulous book called Coronado Confidential. It can't happen here. So for another episode of the Reading Corner on the Mark Bishop Show, I, ladies and gentlemen, would proudly like to welcome Mr. Joe Ditler. How you doing, Digger? How you doing?
I think you just wrote my obituary. Can I use that?
Well, I regard you as a master storyteller with your phantasmagorical tales of an unforgettable era that thrived in an even unlikelier place, Joe. I got to tell you, it's a great book, mate, and not too long either. So, it's easy to get through.
I guess that was the one thing our generation can claim is that, we had a short attention span.
Well, one can't be held but be awestruck, really, dumbstruck even by the self-induced twists and turns of your curious and often uproarious life as a teenager and beyond.
Well, thank you. It certainly was a unique time. I don't think we'll ever see that again. It was crazy. I mean, like I said on the book, it's all sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And if you can't make fun of it, well, then what are you going to do?
It definitely and soulfully, Joe Ditler reawakened the memories, music, and madness of a self-century generation. Now, this is what the book is about, folks, and if you're of that era, you got to get this thing. It'll bring back a lot of memories for you. You are a former writer, in fact, with the Los Angeles Times, Joe, past bureau chief with the Log newspapers, and editor-at-large with the Sailing Magazine as a waterfront reporter. I mean, you've written for international newspapers and magazines, for more than 3 decades now. So tell us about some of those times, if you would.
Well, it was a crazy time. Before the social media, you could actually make a living as a freelance writer. And I did just that. I wrote for magazines, sailing magazines all over the world. I guess I got a little pigeonholed in that I covered the waterfront. But my waterfront was an international waterfront, and it was a lot of fun, whether it was a ship's cat or an old schooner or someone lost at sea or a beautiful young woman who wanted to single-hand her way across the Pacific. There was never a dull moment.
No, I wouldn't think so with that lot.
And I do love telling stories, so it was just a natural thing for me.
Right. Well, I mean, you've got what? I think you also wrote the books, The Life and Times of Joe Rizza.
Admiral Rizza.
Friend of all the world. And the Dick Vigiglio story. Right? Strong in, strong out. Give us a brief overview of that.
Well, Dick was the founder of trauma surgery in San Diego, and it started out just as, he wanted to document what he had done, and it turned out to be such a great story. We did a book on it, and he was very happy with that. And Admiral Joe Rizza, I've always been attracted to older people and their stories. I was an only child. My parents were older, and more often than not, I'd sit around the room listening to old guys tell their stories. And Admiral Joe Rizza, we started out that way, and I was just so taken by his life that we did it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing for a young fella. It's like being, listening to all the very early stories we grew up with in those days, the wonderful cartoon magazines, and then Biggles, and I don't know if you know Biggles, that was very Australian and British, but oh, look, there's a lot of different plays. Chicken Man, you remember that one?
No.
You don't remember Chicken Man? That was huge in America. You see, you were lost on the island. You guys out there surfing every day, huh? So, so really, you've got 15 years of executive experience with museums, from San Francisco to San Diego, and now you own a public relations business where you work with a variety of business clients, really, products, authors, and you try to help them to enhance their public profile. Continuing to help businesses and individuals gain exposure for their work. How did you survive with the pandemic, virtually closing everything down there on Coronado?
Mark, I work out of my house. I have a condo on the 16th floor of the Coronado Shores. And when the pandemic hit, I just continued to do what I've always done. I mean, a writer's job is a lonely job. You're by yourself, eventually writing that story. And the pandemic wasn't that critical for me. If I had to go out and interview an older person, sometimes there was a fear on their part that, they didn't want to be in a room with me. And there weren't enough masks to do that. But in all honesty, the pandemic was not that hurtful to what I do.
Well, you're very fortunate. And another interesting channel that you've been involved in as the years have passed on more and more. On your bio, I read that you write obituaries. What's the skinny on that one, Joe?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. Well, as a young, impressionable student, I wanted to be a journalist. I saw that Woodward Bernstein movie, and I want to be a writer. And I never thought I'd write the great American novel, and certainly I haven't. But I also never thought I'd be Joe the obit writer. And yet that's what it turns out. I do more obits than anything else. Now, you tell me, is that a product of just my age? I'll be 70 here shortly.
Well, you look younger than that, so, it looks like the fresh air down there has done you good, along with the paraffin fuel coming off the jets as they fly over the 16th floor. How do you handle the noise there, mate? It drove me nuts. I mean, hey, that's the price of freedom, I understand, but boy,
I've got to make a disclaimer here to your audience. I frequently make jokes about the term zonies, but you have to know that many of my best friends and lovers have been zonies. And I hope that isn't offensive. We've been had you all here in our backyard, our front yard too, for centuries, and it's a delightful experience. I wouldn't have met you if that hadn't been the case. But recently, a friend said, "Don't use that term. You're going to offend them."
Hey, mate, I'm an Aussie, and I'm still learning what you can't say here. You know what I mean? But then again, you got to be yourself, right? Listen, with this obituaries thing, I mean, you liken it to one of the necessary evils. Really, this isn't a joke. I mean, it's quite nice if you think about it. One must anticipate people dying. So with people going, maybe the surviving family, they'd like to be better prepared. Things like a last will and testament, choosing, burial versus cremation, and designating a trustee for your estate. So you prepare the final story, should you be part of a package sort of thing, and you call that a living obituary.
Right. Yeah. Eventually, I realized that it was tough to interview people when they were dead. And so, it was only a natural progression to
See, I can tell you're not a spiritualist. I talk to the dead every night. I mean, there's nothing to be frightened of. Can you recall a really good one that stood out, Joe? One of these living obituaries.
Well, they're all special in their own way. I did one in last year about a man named Mel Moore. He was a Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam, and they put him in the Hanoi Hilton with Stockdale and McCain and all these people that we've grown to know and associate with that. Oh my God! He told me things that he'd never told anyone. We laughed and we cried together. And I'm digitally sound recording the whole interview, and it's just the two of us in the room. And people forget there's a microphone on after the second question, and we become two old guys sharing stories. And I tell you what, his children and their children and their children forever will be able to listen to that and hear him laugh, hear him cry, hear him talk about his relationship with God or how he loved his family, and in addition to all the torture he went through in Vietnam. And anyway, we celebrated his death and his life last Friday. We couldn't do anything because of the pandemic, but it was a beautiful thing. And lastly, we had a squadron of jets fly over with the missing man formation.
All right.
And
Well, that was
it was
fitting, very fitting. Yeah.
what a dry eye.
Yeah, lovely. Nice thing. So your book covers a slice of Southern Californian history. Most either, probably most would not remember or choose not to remember. Why did you pick this topic? And just tell us the name of the book again, Joe.
It's called Coronado Confidential.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it can't
really,
happen here.
It can't happen here.
I just wanted to remind people what the devil we were talking about here. So why did you pick this topic?
Obviously, when you're growing up, you're a teenager, you're doing things that are, you do them not because you should, but because you could. And we were rebellious. We were troublemakers. And we were passionate about doing our thing. The greatest generation came before us, and our parents were lovely, but it wasn't our life. And we spread out. We grew our hair long. We smoked pot. We dropped acid. We did free love. It was just a thing. And for years after that, Mark, I was embarrassed about it. But now I've come to realize that'll never be recreated again. That was a very special and very colorful era, and I'm so proud to have been a part of it. And I hope when you read the book, it'll.
Well, I got that out of it. I absolutely got that out of it, and I chuckled as well. There's a lot of funny spots in there. Listen, I was going to ask you, why is this particular period of time so attractive to you? But you sort of covered a bit of it then, and it was unique, wasn't it? I mean, we're so far from it today.
It really was, yeah. Gosh, I just don't think it'll ever be recreated. The music was so special. We now refer to it as first generation rock and roll or classic vinyl, but no, it was our soundtrack at that time, at that moment, and we learned of that music firsthand. We were like the first people to get hit in the face with it, and it's even more special because of that.
Well, I often sort of complain a little bit that Tucson's small, like, 2 degrees of separation. Everybody knows everybody. You can't get away with nothing. So, but Coronado, it's such a small town. Although it's in its own little bubble, what is this fascination for Coronado and its history, do you think?
Our little island, and recently in the newspaper, someone took us to task. It's not an island, they declared. Well, maybe it's a metaphor, but you've been here. Anybody who's been here knows how very special it is. And during the virus, I think it was never more apparent. It was like we had a little dome over us protecting us.
Well, mate, I can tell you, I'm glad it's not an island because I wouldn't have been able to do that bridge. So we came in the other way. What's it called again? Empire or Premier, I forget. But it is technically, it's not an island, but it sort of is an island because you know why? When you look across the other side of it at the city where the ferries come across there, that looks like, you're on an island and you've got to come from there on a ferry boat to get there. It would have been big in those days. So
we're a peninsula, but there are times of the year when it rains hard and the big swell and it covers up the Silver Strand and we are an island. But I'm not saying technically, geographically so much as spiritually. This place has always been its own little special bubble, little bubbles. And I don't know why, but I certainly have enjoyed it for more than half a century. It's just a great little place.
Well, Joe, you are often heard, really, excuse me, to refer to the rest of the world, the non-Coronado Island world as over there, across the bridge in America. What do you mean? Come on.
Well, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? Coronado is that dramatically different. We're slower, we're quieter, we're just a different place. And
very laid back,
you go into a different civilization. And so I just always say, I'm not going to go across that bridge to America, not today.
Well, yeah, and June was busy enough. It was my first break in many years, but how did the parade go? All of that in July, pretty cool.
Oh, it was crazy good.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's packed, right? You can't park at the best of times, right? Unless you know where to go. You got to ride a bike everywhere. But the thing is, it really swells in July, doesn't it? July and August down there, would you say?
Oh, God, yeah.
Or over there, I should say. Yeah, over there. So let's talk about your book. It's written self-depreciatingly, I think. No one pokes more fun at you than yourself. What's up with that?
Well, I use real people, real names, real events. I just felt it was imperative to do that And I wrote it in a self-deprecating way because I wanted people to laugh at me and with me, and I think it works. I'm nobody special in my mind. I'm not higher than anybody else. I was a player in a very important game that took place back then, and I'm just fortunate that I remembered so much of it and that I was able to share that story. And yeah, if you can't laugh at yourself,
Yeah, it's pretty sad,
what
isn't
is
it?
it?
That's about it. So has your book audience been strictly baby boomers who experienced, the flower years era?
No, surprisingly, I had an 80-year-old man come up to me not long ago and tapped me on the shoulder and says, I really love that book. And don't you think for a minute that it was just your era? We did the same thing.
There you
And he was
go.
from the Midwest.
Well, this is it. When people are honest, everybody, one way or another, when they were young in this country, did it all. I mean, I'm from just an island continent. Mate, I didn't have my first J till I was 36. You guys are done by 20. Hey, in the book, you cover things like hitchhiking, drug experimentation, transcendental meditation. I did that a little bit. And even an introduction to Christianity. And yet, you also seem to celebrate bending the rules, / the laws, to have fun. How do you rationalize that, Joe?
Well, I'm not sure I can. I'm in a Bible study, and I'm constantly being reminded by the gentleman in the study that you've accepted Christ in your life, but you're still a sinner. How do you rationalize that? Well, I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes, but the fact is that none of us are perfect, and especially me. And I have found a great solace, in my relationship with the Lord. And that all started with the transcendental meditation, and more importantly, the TM got me out of drugs. It got me out of a rut I was in with a lot of marijuana and a lot of LSD and psychedelics, and it just changed my whole orbit. And from that point on, I've been a changing man. I say changing as in ongoing process. And I don't think, if you can't admit to that, then I think you're lying for most people.
Yeah, I like that better than telling me you're a born again Christian. All right. I think I think it's down to death. Listen, what's your next book gonna be?
Well, I've been getting a lot of pressure from people in the community. On my Facebook page, I've written a couple of hundred stories about history of Coronado, old people who had come before us and their adventures. And so I think I'm going to put together a book about just Coronado history. People outside of Coronado, now your audience will get this, but a lot of people across the bridge in America will think, oh, well, that's not going to be interesting. But no, I think it will be. There's so much that went on here. It was the birthplace of naval aviation. I've got such wonderful stories from old timers.
Yeah, and there's some nice shots in the book as well. And, you've seen this thing grow since you were a kid on the sands. There was no bridge. You're back in the very early days of Coronado. And tell me a little bit about the station. I enjoyed that part in the book as well because it reminded me of when I was a kid and I got my first radio job in the outback because you got to start in the bush, and you got to earn your way up to Cap City in Australia. And we don't have as many markets as you have. But at the end of the day, that underground station that was booming out of Coronado, even the principal got behind it in the long run, right?
Well, I think I said in the book that the KPRI FM was an underground radio station, and they just took liberties. And that radio was playing when you lost your virginity, or when you went skinny dipping at Gator Beach here, where the shores are now,
right?
Or the midnight ferry boat ride across the bay, or 1,000 other memories. And, it was a great time. And like I say, a great soundtrack. And this one disc jockey got crazy on LSD one night and played the Beatles' Hey Jude for 4.5 hours. And, I think I stared at the little light in my radio for 4.5 hours, listening to his every crazy, wild thing, hearing the vinyl records being flung against the wall.
Yeah, right. Because let's face it, traditional radio, you weren't allowed to do that length of time. You had a very short period. And it used to be called dump music or whatever, because that's the only time when a jock could go to the loo, right? Or the toilet, or the head, or the bathroom, or the dunny, as we say in Australia. That's just one of the slang words.
The long version. The long versions gave them a liberty to go make love on the couch in the back room, or go take a long dump.
Unbelievable,
whatever.
Yeah. Well, my music, that track was heard it on the grapevine. That was my quick twinkle toe out there and back again. But, we have all those experience stories. And you've had some, also in that station, some heavy-duty, famous people used to go in there when they visited or were playing on the island.
Oh, God, yeah. The band, The Who, Dennis Hopper, they always had actors and people coming in to promote movies and their concerts and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
It was a great time.
Yeah, great actor, Dennis Hopper. I liked him. He's done all sorts of things, hasn't he? So the book, ladies and gentlemen, I know you might like it. You never know. Help this poor guy get off the street, will you? Because it'll feed him for another month. He's on the 16th floor, but it's all empty and everything. Here's the deal. How does one acquire your book?
Well, you can Facebook message me. It's just Joe Ditler, or you can drop me a note.
You've got no, yes, LinkedIn. I asked you. Well, you've got no Twitter, and you've got nothing else. But you do have a Facebook, right?
I'm kind of a Luddite that way. I'm not turned on to the technology except for Facebook. But yes, I have Facebook. But
all right.
If you do get a book, contact me, and I'd like to write something, not just my name.
That's nice. So you're actually going to give them a signed copy.
Oh, not just that, but I'll write something special just to
Lovely. So the best way then for me to get the book, it's not like I can jump onto Amazon like, everything else. Most authors, nearly every author that I interview has their own site where they sell the book, or it's also sold off Amazon, and it's sold through one of the retail, major literary stores. So in your case, what are we going to do?
You can get the book on Amazon. But for the same price, you can get it from me.
And a nice signed, yeah. All righty. So how do I contact you? I want to buy the book.
Well, it's a P.O. box, and that number is 180101, Coronado, 92178.
I thought you were going to say 92110 for a minute. I remember that TV series. 921. All righty. So we got that. All right. Joe Ditler, Coronado Storyteller. The name of the book, Joe?
Is Coronado Confidential. And by the way, there might be a third book in the works. I'm thinking of writing about your last adventure here to Coronado.
No. Hey, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You understand that? All right, my friend, ladies and gentlemen, a lovely gentleman, very funny, talented, a great writer. You'll bump into him eventually down there. If you're good looking and you're a chick, he'll be after you. I mean, he's on everyone. He's like flies on honey, or honey on flies, whatever it is. Post Office Box 180101. P.O. Box 180101, okay? Or you can get in touch with me here at Mark Bishop Media. .com, whatever, and I'll help you get the thing. Okay. All right, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with the book, mate. I wish you all the best in the world, and thank you for escorting me around town and showing me the real Coronado.
Thank you, Mark.